The impudence, the audacity, the unmitigated gall of those Knuckleheads of Liberty podcasters, daring to voice opinions outside the mainstream of accepted thought. Listen if you dare. It's angry, it's funny, it's even sometimes sad, but it's always based on freedom and justice, as you will see. Here's our host, Jason McPhee.
Welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty. We're coming at you on August 30th, 2022. Boy, I tell you, it's one day after another of just crazy government just sort of stepping on us in one way or another. But we have a break from that today. And we have a special guest with us, Delugas of ParentsUSA. But before we get into that, let me introduce you to our panel. In our upper right-hand corner, we have Leon, the word Brathwaite, last word in Liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. In our upper left-hand corner, we have our special guest today, David Delugas. He is the founder of ParentsUSA and the executive officer too, I believe. Let's get into that. So we're going to talk to David about his organization and what kind of things they're doing to protect parents' rights, because this is, we've seen just all kinds of crazy stuff with the current administration out there at the federal level, but we also hear about a lot of things too happening at the local levels as well. All kinds of things where they seem to be just stepping on parents' rights, whether it be at the schools or, maybe arresting parents because they don't think that they're properly caring for their kids somehow, or just a whole bunch of different things. So let's jump right into it. So David, did you want to tell us a little bit about your organization? And James, maybe we could get that up on the screen too.
Thank you, Jason. Glad to be here. Leon, glad to join you as well. Your intro is interesting because I'd like to think actually what we discuss has to do with the mainstream. We are the mainstream. People who are in the country believe in liberty and freedom. And that's me. I'm an attorney. And for decades, I practiced law, made a living, did what I'm supposed to do, represent my clients. And then more and more, I paid attention to how intrusive judges were when it came to families. I did a lot of family law, and they're micromanaging. And I paid more and more attention to how law enforcement approaches people with the idea that you can't do what you think is appropriate. You can only do what the law enforcement officer thinks is appropriate, even when there's no law that delineates with any specificity what you can and cannot do. It's one of the problems in our country. It occurred to me that somebody should do something about it. So I did a lot of research first. I just went online and looked who is out there looking after the rights of individuals in the country. Well, the ACLU kind of used to. They still engage in activity, but one can question whether they are truly fulfilling their own mission. The Institute for Justice does fantastic work and is true to their word and their mission, which is to protect the constitutional rights of Americans. So I reached out to them, said, hey, how about parents? Let's do more and more for parents in America. And understandably, they believe that would constitute what I've now learned is a phrase in the nonprofit world, mission creep, where your mission isn't well defined and you're not holding to it. So they declined my offer to come join them and go into these arenas that I felt needed some attention. So nothing left to do but start our own organization. So it's the National Association of Parents, Inc., but we do business as ParentsUSA, and our URL is ParentsUSA.org. We are a 501c3 organization. We've been in existence since 2013. And instead of talking about the rights of parents and freedoms and liberty and how awful it is when those rights are infringed, we decided we needed to go out and do the work, walk the walk. So as things progressed and people came to us for help, or one of our earlier cases, I saw the mugshot of a mother who had been arrested in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, while on vacation with her 2 kids. And the headline read that mom arrested, charged with child endangerment because she left her children at home alone. Well, the headline caught my attention, and I wanted to know more. So I obtained a copy of the police report. Most of us probably know that whether it's Freedom of Information Act or simply public access, the public is entitled to most of these documents. So I obtained from the Rehoboth Beach Police Department a copy of the police report, and it turns out it wasn't she left them home alone. She and her kids were there on vacation. They had a rental unit at the beach. She went to get food to go from a restaurant, and her 9-year-old took the dog out for a walk, and a stranger became concerned and called the police, and the police showed up, and the police do what the police do. They arrested her and charged her with child endangerment under Delaware law. Now, I compared the police report, so let's just assume everything the police officer wrote down is true.
Were there other kids involved, David, besides the 9-year-old?
She has a daughter, but the daughter was in the rental unit.
Okay.
And incidentally, part of the investigation I undertook before I contacted the mom and offered our pro bono, most of your listeners probably know that means free. So to her, we weren't going to charge her anything. But I looked at the Delaware statute, and I also contacted a bicycle rental store on the boardwalk. It's a vacation resort.
Right.
Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. It now this has been years ago. It's now in the news because our president resides there. But I contacted a bicycle rental shop and I said, hey, I'm coming on vacation to Rehoboth Beach. I have a 9-year-old. I'd like to go sit on the beach and read a book and let my 9-year-old ride a bike by himself. Is that allowed? And the gentleman running the bicycle rental store replied, of course, I'm looking out the window now. I see kids riding their bikes up and down the boardwalk and their parents are elsewhere. So I'm thinking, all right, so just the fact that the child's alone shouldn't have been cause either for concern or for the police to take action. I called the local public school, the elementary school, and I said, just question, do you have a bicycle rack out front? The answer was yes. I said, do kids ride their bike or walk to school? They go, yes. I said, do their parents ride bikes with them or follow them in their car or walk with them? And the school person was like laughing at me going, no, the kids walk here all the time. In fact, we're not allowed under Delaware law to provide bus transportation if a student lives within 1 mile of our school. So I'm thinking, it's not against the law to have your child out and about on their own. Why in the world was this mom arrested? So I contacted her, offered our services, obtained local counsel, filed a piece of paper that is called an entry of appearance, merely the style or caption of the criminal case, State versus Susan Trillian. Anybody wants to Google her name, you'll find her mugshot. It was in USA Today's digital edition. And within 2 days of filing that paper that says she has legal representation, the state dismissed the charges.
So it sounds like they were just a bunch of bullies then.
Sure sounds that way.
A little sarcasm. Gee whiz, imagine police and government and prosecutors being bullies. One of the things that's come up over time, and this is applicable to parents and non-parents, it's applicable to the case I just mentioned, other cases involving parents, but it also applies to just about every other case in the criminal justice system. Clark Neely, outstanding attorney, he's with the Cato Institute. He has used the phrase plea coercion. Now, we always hear about plea deals, right? The plea deal.
Yes.
He calls it plea coercion. And it is more outrageous when applied to young defendants, criminal defendants of color who are poor, who are using public defenders and are charged. They're usually overcharged. The example I often use is it's shoplifting, but instead of charging shoplifting, which might be a fine and some small penalty, they're charged with armed robbery because maybe they had a pocket knife in their pocket, never displayed it. But so they're charged with, anyway, so they're charged by the prosecution with armed robbery. They face 25 years to life. And then they're offered a plea deal of 2 years in jail, but you serve 1 and you're out in 6 months with good behavior and you pay a $500 fine. And if you're in a jurisdiction where you're concerned, you're the criminal defendant, you're concerned that even though you're innocent, you're not guilty of this outrageous overcharge, but you could get convicted. Are you really willing to take the risk of 25 years when you could pay a small fine, serve 6 or 8 months in the county jail instead of the big house? So yeah, that's part of our criminal justice reform that we should be paying attention to, but it's just as applicable here. And let me tell you why. And I know I'm running on, but parents are, some parents, of course, and we hear about them in the news, are anything between contentious or terrorists. We don't know which they are. But most parents that we encounter, and think about those, and if you're watching this at home or in your office, are you a parent who cowers and gets concerned if somebody accuses you of being a bad parent? Oh, you didn't give your child the right juice box, the right food. You didn't give them the right clothing for the weather today. Any criticism of a parent is often taken to heart. Now, when somebody in law enforcement, child protective services, or a judge calls you out and says, you did wrong, you violated the law, whether you did or you didn't, parents cower and get scared and get nervous. They don't like being called a bad parent. They don't like thinking maybe they are, and they second guess themselves. So one of the messages I hope our organization can get across to parents is, they're your kids. Do the best you can. Don't hurt them. But you know them better than anybody. You know what they're capable of. You know how responsible or irresponsible they are. You know whether you can trust them or not trust them. You decide the level of freedom and responsibility that you give your children, and ignore the voices from the in-laws, from the neighbors, from the friends, the co-workers who are trying to tell you how to raise your kids. And when law enforcement and the government gets involved, feel free to politely, civilly say, look, they're my kids. I'm going to do this because I think they're safe and that this is the right way to raise them. And if they don't agree with you, email us at help@ParentsUSA.org, and we'll give you our thoughts on it and possibly participate in defending you.
David, you just mentioned child protective services, and I always wonder if these people really protect the children as they're supposed to be doing, because it seems to me too often it involves the violation of the rights of parents to raise their children, as you just rightfully said. In terms of your work, though, how much of your work do you end up with up against people from these so-called protective services for kids? Are you engaged in lawsuits or any sort of activity with these agencies?
Well, certainly. I mean, across the country, Child Protective Services goes by different names depending on by the state, the jurisdiction. So in other states, it's Department of Family and Children Services, or CPS, Child Protective Services. But whatever they're called, let's start with the premise that, or the belief that, their existence is important. And if they were run correctly, they're a valuable service to our community to protect the most vulnerable children who are actually being hurt. Yes. And maybe, again, the starting ground should be this. It's not what you, Leon, Jason, or I, or anybody else thinks should be the rights of parents. The U.S. Supreme Court, which has come under fire as of late, but let's just say the U.S. Supreme Court for 100 years or more has held that parents have, and here's the constitutional law lesson, everybody, the fundamental right, which is the highest level of constitutional rights, the fundamental right to raise their children as they decide, so long as not causing actual harm, either physical harm or long-term emotional harm. So mere discomfort or a mere slight is not sufficient to allow the state to infringe on those rights. Constitutional law lesson number 2. The state always has the right to infringe on any of our constitutional rights, First Amendment, Second Amendment, Fourth Amendment, the fundamental right of parents, if, here's the qualifier, if there is a compelling governmental interest. So what's a compelling governmental interest? The argument when it comes to parents is to protect children from actual harm, physical harm or long-term emotional harm. One more piece of constitutional law for everybody to put in your heads. And by the way, this applies across the board to all of our rights.
Yeah.
When
I was just noticing that it seems like there's a parallel there with all this COVID stuff we've been through, because it almost sounds like what level of risk they think is too much for you to, let your kid be exposed to going outside, doing things. Maybe their oversensitivity to that is very similar to what happened with COVID recently, where, they simply canceled all of our rights.
Yeah, but the problem is, Jason, and you're right. You're raising a good issue. You're right. Is the government defining the level of risk that we should be willing to accept? That is a big problem. But go ahead, David, with your answer. Yes.
You both raise really important points, and ultimately, I think the message I want to make sure everybody understands is we end up having to live with what the courts tell us is permissible, meaning we can disagree with the government's labeling of something as a compelling governmental interest. And by the way, here's the second part of that. If there's a compelling governmental interest that allows them to infringe on your rights, then the infringement is supposed to be in the least restrictive manner necessary to accomplish the compelling governmental interest. So that means, yes, there's a compelling governmental interest in protecting your children from harm, but that doesn't mean they can take them and put them in children camps because the government says all parents are bad. So what's the level of intrusion, the level of infringement? Again, that is a subjective determination that we need to get more power behind the movement of parents, which that shouldn't be hard. By the way, what are the most powerful organizations in America after the government? Say the AARP as an example, the NRA. Why are they powerful? Whether you agree or disagree with any of the positions they take, let's acknowledge they're powerful, they're influential, they get their agenda done. And the reason is money and votes. They have a lot of people in their organizations and they have a lot of money. And those are the things that matter. So at some point, I'm going to point out, I can do, and our staff can do all the work we can do, and we can file lawsuits or join appeals as amicus curiae, which is Latin for friend of the court. We can really advocate for the position of parents and parental rights, but ultimately nobody listens until a court makes a declaration through a court order, or legislators, governors, the president, all the way down to local city officials recognize, now we're in trouble. Those parents have organized. We're as powerful as a union. And there are parents' unions out there that are coming together. And let me say, I'm not being critical of any organization out there that wants to advance a particular position, but what distinguishes ParentsUSA from all other parents organizations is we don't have an agenda of the outcome that we want. So we're not battling for or against a particular position. We are battling for the right of the parent to make the decision for their family, for their children, even though other parents may make a completely different choice. It's the freedom to choose. And for us to be the pushback or the bumpers to say, hey, government, if something's going on that's compelling and you need to protect children from harm, going to Leon's point about CPS, which yes, they're overzealous. They have too much power, too much right. And the courts defer to them and their factual findings and beliefs, and due process is often ignored. And in their zeal to, at least the claim, to protect children from harm, they often cause more harm by separating children from their parents unnecessarily. I mean, look, anecdotes work well to illustrate. So let me quickly give you a Child Protective Services incident that we offered our services. The parents had counsel, South Florida. An 11-year-old gets off the school bus, goes into his own backyard, is playing basketball and waiting on his dad, who's self-employed, to come the 2 or 3 blocks from his workplace home to let him in. For reasons that are internal to the family, this 11-year-old didn't have a key to his house. So that latchkey expression, he did not go into his house. He was in his yard. Some concerned neighbor called the police, and the police showed up and then called CPS, and CPS showed up, waited for the parents to come home, and took both the 11-year-old and the younger sibling away from the parents and put them in foster care until they could have a court hearing. Why? Because the law enforcement of CPS determined that this 11-year-old in his own backyard was in danger. He could have gotten thirsty. He didn't have a bathroom. He didn't have food. And as the facts came out, he's a boy. If he needed to use the bathroom in his own backyard, he knew what to do. If he was thirsty, there was a water hose there, and he wasn't hungry because he just came home from school and he had lunch earlier. And it's not the level of harm that was even at risk. So one of the pushbacks we have, and I spoke at length in a different podcast about this, is we're never going to get rid of the busybody neighbor or person who thinks some kid is in danger because he's at a park playing and there's no adult supervising the play. And yes, we can all harken back to the days in our pasts where, hey, we used to ride our bikes off in the morning and come back by dinner time and nobody cared because that's how life was. And no, things are not more dangerous now to kids than they were 30 or 40 years ago. The FBI statistics, if we believe anything the FBI does, those statistics say that we're actually living in safer times than times that where children are at risk. So here's what the pushback is. People are going to say, hey, I'm worried about this child. That means the 911 dispatchers across the country need to be trained, need to be told, which means their superiors, supervisors need to be told from the governor down. That's where we come in. We want to change just the protocol. So the 911 operator gets a call, hey, there's some kids out here and there's no adult nearby supervising. And instead of going, okay, what's the address and sending a police car, are they hurt? Does any child appear to be hurt? No. Does the child appear to be in danger from some identifiable risk of harm? Open swimming pool, construction site, oncoming traffic? No, but something could happen. Thank you for your concern and your call. If we have an available officer, we'll send them by. And then they tell a law enforcement officer, hey, over at this address, there's a report of some kids unsupervised. Police officer should just drive up, pull up, and if everything looks like nobody's in distress, nobody's hurt, let it go. Let it go. And go ahead, Jason.
Well, one of the things I was just going to say is to add on to what you're getting at here is it seems like what the police and government are doing is they're engaged in a game of CYA. I mean, they don't want to be the ones who are left holding the bag if something does happen to that kid. And then they said, well, we told the police and they didn't do anything. So this seems like it's a culture change within the institution where we have to say, hey, look, you guys don't have to cover your butts on all these things, they're maybe like you said, they're just setting a different protocol or something like that.
Well, the point is though, in the act of covering their, they become overzealous and violate the rights of parents. I think that's what's going on here.
Yeah, Leon makes a good point. What happens too is when there's these expressions like power corrupts absolutely. When you give people power, Child Protective Services, law enforcement, prosecutors, they tend to take that power to their heads and do whatever they want with it. So,
Yes.
and again, another analogy as a society, we should take a look at this. One of the concerns about our healthcare costs is doctors who over-test, who do too many tests, who do too many, examine too much because they're afraid of malpractice lawsuits, those
Right.
horrible trial lawyers, right?
Yes.
So this
Yes.
goes to covering their arrears. Doctors are doing more than they should. The costs go up, malpractice insurance premiums. But here's a different arena when we come to government. You just about can't win a lawsuit against government due to what's called qualified immunity. Well, there's no constitutional, there's no case law that says this is a violation of constitutional rights to arrest a parent who you suspect may be putting their child at risk by going to a restaurant to get food or letting their kids ride the bike by themselves during the summertime throughout the day, or play at a park. A mom in, I think it was South Carolina, was arrested when her 9-year-old that she had been taking with her every day to McDonald's where she worked, and that kid had to sit there all day during her shift, said, "Can I go to the park and just play?" And the mom let the child do that, and she ends up getting arrested. Those are the absurdities that cause me and ParentsUSA and all of us, we should be looking at this going, okay, so what if they want to cover their arrears or they're worried about lawsuits? Bring it on. We need to tell them to stop worrying about it and allowing kids to play on their own. I mean, we probably have all seen this where a group of kids, boys and girls, are jogging. Yeah, you know what? They're part of the cross-country team at their local junior high or high school, and they're out jogging by themselves. And nobody says, oh my gosh, there are no adults with them. We need to go stop them, take them back to their parents, report them to Child Protective Services.
Well,
but
hey,
if
David,
they're walking, they might.
Well, speaking of running, we're getting close to running out of time, and I don't want to let you go before we get into a little bit about how the organization is structured. So how do parents, really quick, get in touch with you guys? And do you guys mainly help people out if they are already a member of your organization, or are you guys just sort of out there looking for, cases?
Well, we're not looking for cases. We get requests all day long, every day. People can either fill out a form on our website, ParentsUSA.org, or email help@ParentsUSA.org. But let me point out one thing, because I know this is in the news all the time. Parents are saying, hey, I don't want my child to be taught X, Y, or Z, whatever it is, at their school. Fine. You have the right to enroll your child at a different school, to homeschool your child, to move if you need to a different jurisdiction, different school district. Just like belonging to a homeowners association or a country club or a bridge club or a soccer team, if you enroll your child to play Little League Baseball, you don't get to come in and say, but I want my child to get 4 strikes instead of only 3 before they're called out. We as parents have the right to control what our child does. We don't have the right to control what other people do in interacting with our child when we voluntarily enroll them in a club or a school. So I want to point that out. That's one reason parents' choice, which is what we like to call it, not school choice, is such an important issue, so that parents have more affordable options when it comes to education, so we can, through deciding where our children are going to attend school, influence how the schools view our children as more customer friendly, more customer service oriented, more we have to compete to get you to want to enroll your child at our school. One of the issues that comes up all the time is about notice and informing parents. There is no excuse for any person to not keep parents notified in advance of everything going on. Transparency is important when it comes to medical care, medical advice, anything that goes on with a child. We're passionate about it because the law is very clear. Parents have a right to know everything. Any of these laws that are being bandied about saying, hey, we're going to be able to advise your child about medical care. I'm distraught that in many jurisdictions, a teenager girl can get an abortion. Wherever you stand on abortion, that's not the point. They can get the abortion without the parents knowing the child was pregnant or that the child got a court order allowing a medical provider to give her an abortion. And the argument, the pushback is, well, what if it's the brother who, through incest impregnated her, or the stepbrother or the dad? Well, they need to be in jail. We need to not hide behind we're going to let her have an abortion, but we're not going to let the parents know. We're going to give your child a vaccination, any vaccination, without the parents' knowledge and consent. If it becomes, and I've given this public statement many a time, if the government can show in a court of law that it is harmful, not just it might be better, if it's harmful to the child not to receive a particular vaccination, not lumping all vaccinations together, and prove that by clear and convincing evidence, and the judge says so, and then on appeal that gets reaffirmed as, yes, it's harmful to a child not to get this vaccination, then fine. But up till that point, parents must be notified, kept in the loop, have the opportunity to object, and put the burden of proof on the state to say it is harmful not to do what we're insisting get done. Otherwise, the state's exceeding their authority. And we as an organization, we as parents need to come together. And that's the message I have. Not just my self-interest. It's that we need to come together and say, we're going to be powerful. And sure, there are a lot of groups that are being influential in front of school boards. That's great. But again, ultimately, the school board, until you vote them out, they can do whatever they want. Or until you withdraw your student and put them in a different school. So we have to think about what's the most efficient, effective way to flex our parent muscle, right? That's one of my messages.
Indeed.
Well, we're just about out of time. Is there any, do you want to tell us a little bit about the website real quick, just to where parents can go if they want to join your organization?
Well, you don't have to join in order for us to be available for help, but you join or donate to this 501c3 either at our website or at guidestar.org, because we've got their silver, we went from bronze to silver transparency award. You can also go to social media, and the easiest thing everybody could do is go to smile.amazon.com and sign up for Amazon to donate to the National Association of Parents, Inc. There's a link on the bottom of our website to the Amazon. So when you shop, Amazon will actually donate based on your shopping. Your prices don't go up, but doesn't cost you anything. Every person that ever shops at Amazon should be signed up for some charity, and we certainly hope it's our charity, as we've been, again, approved by Amazon. So smile.amazon.com. The link's on the bottom of our website, which is ParentsUSA.org. And of course, if you want to donate $5 a month or $5 once a year, that's great. But we need to get stronger. We need to grow more powerful. We've been consulted on by state legislators around the country on legislation having to do with parents' rights. And hopefully the message that your viewers are getting is we're focused on the rights, how that is applied and how government infringes and the pushback. That it's all part of the process. But not once have you heard me say there's a particular thing we want to see implemented. And the reason is, yes, you as a parent may believe in X, but there are other parents in town who believe in Y. And it would infringe on their rights as parents if we imposed what you want on them and vice versa. It's all about that personal choice for you and your children.
Okay. Well, thanks so much, David. This is certainly a super important message for our viewers, and we hope that you all go out, especially those of you who are parents, and check out David's organization. And we're going to have David back for a panel discussion very shortly on our next podcast. So check us out then, and until then, stay free.
Yes, indeed. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.